Hi, I'm Jake Riley, member of the U.S. Tokyo Olympic Marathon team, and you're listening to the Physical Performance Podcast.
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. These are challenging times, and today we felt it pertinent to bring you an uplifting and inspiring story of overcoming. Today, tune in for the highs, lows, and many learnings from today's featured performer, Jake Riley. On February the 29th, 2020, Jake Riley stood on the start line of the USA Marathon Olympic Trials in Atlanta. This was Jake's third Olympic Games trials, and Jake's mantra for the marathon was no more next times. You see, Jake stood on that start line. He was 32 years of age, and to get to that start line, he had overcome every setback you could imagine. From prior surgery for a Haglund's deformity, an Achilles tendon, through to infection, illness, relationship breakdowns, losing sponsors, all experiences that, as Runner's World magazine quoted, should have had Jake questioning whether he should continue chasing the Olympic dream. But he did, and he broke through on that day for a historic second place behind Galen Rupp, crossing the line in 2 hours, 10 minutes and 2 seconds and securing his ticket to the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. Runner's World magazine ran the headline, "Jake Riley and his coach were broken, now they're going to the Olympic Games." Jake Riley is coached by Lee Troop, former guest of the Physical Performance Show, episode 101. And Lee's synopsis of Jake Riley's breakthrough at the USA Olympic Marathon Trials was simply this: there's nothing better than a broken man coming back. So jump in today as Jake shares around overcoming surgery, persisting. We play a game of top threes as Jake shares his top 3 marathon tips, top 3 training tips, top 3 resilience tips before laying down a physical challenge for the week. This was recorded in the very early days of COVID-19 lockdowns and uncertainty, and I know this is going to really inspire and speak to you through these challenging times. Here is my conversation with Jake Riley. Jake Riley, USA track and field Olympic marathon qualifier at the recent USA Olympic Trials in absolute stellar fashion. Who could forget that run of yours? And here we are now in this post-COVID-19 world. And I just want to reach out and say, firstly, congratulations. And secondly, thoughts are with you from this roller coaster that you're so clearly on at the moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, thank you. And I guess the same goes out to you and all your listeners everywhere in the world, because if it hasn't hit you yet, it sounds like it probably will soon. So wash your hands and stay safe. And I don't know, we'll hopefully get through it together.
Yeah, and I mean, you popped up, I think, a very well-written post there on your Instagram feed, I believe, over the weekend. And, you know, you talk about that, obviously, as we all discover this uncertain world and where it all heads now, that it is not looking likely that the 2020 Olympic Games, the 2020 Olympic Games will be held, and hopefully, as per your post, they'll be postponed a year. But I mean, what are your emotions like at the moment? Obviously, there's a bigger picture at play, but no one could criticize you for being rightly disappointed.
Yeah, so I mean, that's sort of the emotional athlete side that really, really wants to compete at the Olympic Games. And I'm trying to battle that with my intellectual side, which knows that you can't get mad at a hurricane for hitting a town, right? This is a natural disaster, and to proceed as if nothing is changed by the massive economic impacts, the health impacts, is to be, I think, incredibly naive and destructive. So I'm trying to calm myself down. Also, there haven't been made any decisions that would necessarily mean that I can't eventually compete. I think right now it looks like no one's really talking about canceling them completely. It's more of a postpone. And my understanding is if it were to be postponed a year, I would have to demonstrate fitness, but I would still be on the team and allowed to compete. So, it's a dream deferred, but not necessarily canceled. So I'm trying to keep that all in perspective and then, focus on what I can control right now, which is trying to, maintain a good mental, not panic or get too much into the doldrums if, by thinking about things that haven't actually been decided yet. I think we're going to get into my timeline here eventually, but I spent 3 years dealing with injuries. So I have a lot of experience dealing with sort of uncertain futures, no races on the horizon, and just sort of having to live in the present and just do the run the next day. So I'm definitely drawing on that experience right now and just trying to, keep it calm and stay one day at a time. The human toll that it's going to be a lot bigger than anything that we're experiencing sort of just in athletics.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like what you say, a dream deferred, but not ended or ceased. And obviously that brings uncertainty, but the athletic side of you, this has been a childhood dream from 6 years of age, right? So this is something, 3 Olympic Games trials, and you finally broke through in such great fashion. Let's go back to those early days. You identified yourself as a runner quite early on, right?
My earliest running memory would be, so I think of it as 6th grade, but I lived in New Zealand for 4 years. We moved there in 96 and moved back to the States in 2000. So it would have been, I think, standard 3 was what they were calling it in New Zealand. But anyways, so I was probably 8 at the time, 7 or 8, and we had a citywide cross country meet that I got to participate in, and I did really well there. And so that kind of contributed to my at least love of the competition side of running. And then I just kind of did that. I would do any race opportunity that came up. And then I was also a soccer player. And then I didn't really fall in love with the training side until probably high school when I had a bunch of teammates that could show me how it could be done and still be enjoyable. But probably since 7 or 8 was when I first found running.
So 7 or 8. And at what point, Jake, did you realize that you had a quite remarkable talent or a gift?
Well, I did win the city meet that year, which, it's Dunedin, so I don't know how impressive that was. But back when I was a kid, I thought I was just the greatest darn runner in the world. And then I guess it was always kind of going in the background. Probably not until our equivalent of middle school, which is, back in the States, you're probably 11, 12 when you start. This is, I guess, one of my other big watershed moments was in 6th grade. So the first year that you're in middle school, the first day of track practice, because we didn't have cross country, they essentially take all the athletes out and they have you just go around to every single event and just try everything. So you do the high jump and then you go and do the triple jump and then you go do the throws and then you run 100 meters and then the 200 or whatever. And we had this just fantastic athlete at the time. I'm not going to say his full name, but anyway, he was really good. He was just winning everything. He'd win the high jump and then he'd win the 100 and he was just crushing it. And he was also one of the most popular kids in school. But then the 800 meters, I came in just behind him and I could smell that I was getting close. And then the mile, I beat him, and it was a very, very big deal for me. And I heard that later he went home and cried after that. And I'm not proud of this, but I took a little bit of pride in that. And so I think that's where I really kind of saw that maybe it wasn't just something I was good at, but something I could be potentially great at.
And it stood you in good stead, that competitive spirit, because let's face it, you can't run the run that you ran at the 2020 Olympic trials without some real grit and dogged determination.
But yeah, I like to think so. And that's certainly why I got into the sport. I got into it because I like to compete and I like to be good and I like to win. I played a decent number of sports when I was younger. And I think the big reason that I chose running was because that was something that I could win at, that I could be really good. And then from there, from that starting point, I kind of started to fall in love with the other aspects of the sport, getting the best out of yourself and the joy of a solitary run through the woods or whatever it is. But it always comes back to, I like to compete and I like to win and I want to match myself up against the best and see how I stack up.
And where do your genetics come from, Jake? Who are these attributed to, these genes?
Neither one of my parents is much of a runner at all. My dad will sometimes jog for fitness. My grandpa, on my dad's side, was a Texas state champion in the mile back in the 20s. Tall tale stuff. He claims it was somewhere around a 410-ish or something like that, which I think might be a little little aggressive, but he's the only runner I have anywhere in my family tree. So your guess is as good as mine, but I always attribute it to my grandpa Bill.
And I'm sure your grandpa Bill would be happy to claim that one, Jake. It's brilliant. And then, obviously your chronology, we all saw what happened just several weeks ago there in Atlanta, but your chronology, your debut marathon, if I'm correct, Jake, was 2014 in Chicago, and you came out and ran 2:13.16 after spending time at Stanford University and making the All-American team. But that debut marathon, 2:13.16, can you recall what that experience was like, your first marathon?
At the time, I was training with the Hanson's Distance Project out in Rochester, Michigan, which for people that aren't from America, or even maybe some who are, that's kind of one of our premier marathon groups. So I joined them fresh out of Stanford. So they train in Rochester Hills, Michigan, which is a little bit north of Detroit. Some other athletes you might know, Desiree Linden or Brian Sell are both Olympians from that group. And I joined that group with the goal of moving up to the marathon. And one of the great things about that group, it's, you do all of your runs with teammates. Just the institutional knowledge there is huge. So I was training with a couple guys that had, I think, between them at that time, like 20 to 30 marathons under their belt, something ridiculous. Michael Morgan was one of the guys there, and most people might not have heard of him, but like he can click off a 2:14 like nobody's business. And so preparing for that marathon, between the Hanson's advice and Mike Morgan and the other guy's advice, I essentially just was able to tuck in during training and just listen to all of the wisdom they've accumulated about, it's not, when you're at 13 miles, you're not at halfway. So like you should be feeling good and stay relaxed, and you need to get to 20 before you even think about deviating from the plan. Pick your pace, focus on getting your fluids, stay relaxed. And I was able to just follow them throughout the entire process. So it was all pretty straightforward. And then the race played out exactly how I think you would hope it would. I was in a solid pack. We had a pacer through maybe 6 miles, then he fell off. And then I was in a pack of like 5 guys through maybe 16. And at that point, the pack that had gone out in front of us just a little bit too quick, they were starting to come back to me as I was dropping the pack that I was in. And so I was able to just look ahead and say, okay, get the next guy, get the next guy, get the next guy. Yeah, I think I positive split it just a little bit. We had a little bit of a headwind going up that final road when I was solo. Yeah, it went just exactly how we had kind of planned it out when we talked about you're going to run this pace. The time was exactly where we had planned. So I had a pretty easy introduction to the race.
By the sounds of it, you'd done the work and you were well prepared. And if I heard correctly, the advice was 13 miles is not halfway?
Yes.
Or did you say 13 miles is halfway? I think you said is not, correct?
13 miles is not halfway.
Yeah.
So anybody out there, if you're feeling good at 13, you should be. I mean, you've trained to run 26. And so I don't know. It's one of those things where anytime I've ever seen a runner blow up, and usually it's more on the professional side where you're really trying to get after it, it's like I was feeling good at X, and so I decided to push the pace a little bit. And then, by the time you realize that was a bad idea, it's like 17, 18 miles, and then the piano falls on your back and you're done. And so I was able to learn from a bunch of runners who had done that multiple times, like, no, you need to stay relaxed. And if you're still feeling good at 18 through 20, then you can decide to get a little antsy and really try to make something happen.
Wise advice. And off the back of that, Jake, let's fill out Jake Riley's top 3 marathon tips. So once the world's all back and running and, the world majors recommence and, other races are back at it, what would be Jake Riley's top 3 marathon tips to listeners out there?
Okay. 20 miles is halfway.
Yep.
So you need to make it through to 20. Consistency in your buildup is more important than crushing anything. I think especially like in the age of social media, and this happens at the pro level, and I think this happens to pretty much anybody at any level. Like if you're on Strava or wherever it is, you see people just absolutely crushing these workouts. So one that jumps to mind is I saw the Hoka Northern Arizona Elite guys. They did, I think it was like 16 miles at like 4:50 pace. I was like, oh God, they're in such great shape right now. Well, that was like 5-6 weeks out, and you see it every cycle. Like people are crushing it early. With lead troops training, like we don't do anything of that volume. We'll hit that pace and we'll get faster, but like not nearly that volume. And so like just your training is your training. You need to trust the process. Don't get caught up. And it's more about the consistency of workouts over the full buildup than it is about crushing any one particular activity. And then let's see, advice number 3. I don't know. Two nights out is the sleep night. I found that the night before Chicago this past year, 2019, I think I slept maybe 2 hours, but I was still ready to go on race day, and I'd got my good sleep the 2 nights before. So, if you're not sleeping the night before, that means the adrenaline's kicking in and that you're ready to race. It doesn't necessarily mean you're in for a bad time.
These are very rich top 3 tips here, Jake. So I'm going to repeat them. 1, 20 miles is not halfway. 20 miles is halfway. 2, consistency in the build-up's more important than crushing any sessions in particular. And the last one, the third one, 2 nights out is sleep night. And just digging into Chicago there, you said the adrenaline was kicked in, but what, were you just tossing, turning, looking at the roof, unable to fall asleep?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep, that was pretty much it. It was, and I don't know, I might have gotten more sleep than that, but if it was sleep, it was one of those sleeps where like you're dreaming about being awake. Yeah, it was it was awful. Because for the whole day before and then that night, it was just these washes of adrenaline just kind of sweeping through me, and you get that kind of like sick, weak-kneed feeling. And I'm talking about it as if it was a bad thing. For me, having taken so long off of racing, I hadn't felt that kick in a really long time. It was almost comforting to like know that I was in a headspace where I was ready to go out and actually compete. Because even when I'd been racing back in like 2016, 2015, like I wasn't getting that feeling because I was so frustrated and distracted with these other things that I was like, yes, this means that you are mentally prepared, that you actually want something, you're ready to risk something the next day.
And Chicago went well for you that day.
I went fantastic considering what our expectations were going in. Yeah, I ran 2:10:36. Talking with coach beforehand, we thought anything between 2:11 to 2:13 would be fantastic. I was a little skeptical that might be a little aggressive considering how long I'd taken off. So I would have been happy with 2:14. And then the pack went out at 2:11 pace around 2:11 pace, just under. And I just never fell off. And it went fantastic.
And obviously the flow-on question from your Chicago experience, staring at the ceiling the night before, would be, how did you sleep before your February 2020 Atlanta Olympic Trials experience? Was it the same, staring at the ceiling?
I wasn't quite as bad, but I was definitely up and down quite a bit. I also try and stay hydrated, and then like all of a sudden you're like, well, maybe I have to pee again or whatever it is. So I had trouble getting to sleep, had trouble staying to sleep. But honestly, since it's worked for me these last 2, I guess, unfortunately, I kind of have to hope that that's how I feel before every single race, because apparently it's working out for me.
Well, it's one of your top 3 tips, so you can't change it now. It's a success formula. While we play the game of top 3s, Jake, I'd like you to share with us your top 3 tips for stickability or resilience, sticking in there. And then I'd like to go back and just pull out some of your journey, which, for those that aren't aware, it's this time in the world, I think it can offer nothing more than great encouragement and be a great testament to persevering over the long haul. So, Jake Riley, your top 3 tips for resilience or persevering, what would they be? 1, 2, 3.
I think the first one would be that you can get pretty far in training, taking it like just one day at a time. What I mean by that is I don't think you're ever going to really crush your training if like the only thing you're thinking of is tomorrow, especially when things are a little bit uncertain. You're not quite sure how you're going to feel from day to day, which is kind of what I dealt with when I was dealing with injury stuff for so long. It can be hard to motivate yourself to like, get on the bike if you have to rehab yourself, or like to just get out and run when you know it's going to hurt, or it's only going to be like 30 minutes and you're going to feel like crap. Like, it can be very hard to do that with no specific goal in sight. One of the things I found is like, you just put it on the schedule and then you just do it because it's on the schedule. You don't need any greater than reason at that. You just say like, I'm going to hold myself accountable for this schedule. I'm going to run today because running is what I have to do today. And just kind of trick yourself into like, it's not an if, it's just a when type of mentality. Again, you don't want to go through life like that. Like, running is not going to be enjoyable doing that. But I think if you do that long enough and you keep committing to the process, eventually things are going to turn around. And then number 2, which I think helps with number 1, is have somebody else there to help you stay accountable. I find that I am definitely someone that will kind of overthink how I feel or get a little bit too in my head about things. Like, first worry that like I'm not going hard enough, And then when I start going harder, worried that like I'm going too hard now. And then if I pull back, now I'm worried that I'm letting myself off the hook. I just get too mentally into things. I don't know when to say no, or if I say no, whether that was the right decision. My philosophy with a lot of my training is just, I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to understand what I'm doing or why I'm doing. I'm going to let somebody else worry about that. So with my coach right now and with coaches I've had in the past, maybe some people disagree with this idea. It's like Troop gives me a schedule and then I do what's on the schedule. I don't really need to second guess it, just buy into the process. And I think that can work whether you're training for something specific or you're just trying to stay in shape. It's like somebody else gives you a schedule. I think it's a lot easier to kind of hold yourself accountable to something that somebody else provides you. The most productive version of that is probably like something you get from a coach, but like, I don't know, it would probably work if like your 6th grade Spanish teacher gave you a schedule and it's just, this is not my decision. This is somebody else's decision. Yeah. And I'm just going to listen to what somebody else gives me. And I think that can get you a pretty long ways until, the adrenaline and the emotion of actually having something to train for can finally kick in. Yeah. And I think for people that are stuck inside or whatever, just have somebody else write your schedule could potentially be a good way to get through this hopefully short period of turmoil. Yeah. And then the other part of resilience, have something else going on, which again, I know is tough right now, but I think when things really started to go south for me when I was with the Hansons was when I was injured and I was trying to like kind of rehab things sort of in the background, but all I was doing there was just running. I had nothing else really going on. When all you have to do is run and you've done your, hour of rehab or 2 hours of rehab for the day, like it's kind of depressing to just sit there and watch Netflix for the rest of the time and just think about how you're not fit and you have no real hopes of getting fit. And so one of the big things that I've tried to change about my life since I moved out to Colorado and done this whole rebuild was I always want to make sure that I have something that is not related to running that I can fall back on if things are going badly. And then even if things are good, I think it's good to get sort of a mental break. So I'm currently in grad school here in mechanical engineering. I also work part-time as an SAT tutor. And even though things for me with running are going really well right now, and I have a lot of opportunities on the running side, I don't know that I'm ever going to fully step away from those things because like I've been on break for the last couple of weeks. And I think that's really easy to sort of get into sort of a malaise during that process. But I've been engaged in other activities, and I think that it helps me keep me on a more even keel as much when things are going good as when they're going bad. So find something else to invest in. And I know that that's a very broad topic, and it's potentially a little bit hard to do, but like, I don't know, decide you're going to get really good at sketching or something. Just find something else to think about that is not athletics so that you don't just kind of gnaw at that one little thing all the time.
Yeah, powerful. So I'm going to repeat them. Jake Riley's top 3 resilience tips. Never been more needed than right now in the world. 1, take one day at a time. 2, have someone hold you to account. And 3, have something else going on, not just that sole goal. They're really, really rich and powerful. Jake, you mentioned, when things started to go south with your injury trials. Can you walk us through the chronology there? My understanding is it culminated in surgery for Haglund's, which, is a bit of a bony growth on the back of the heel, the calcaneus there that may have been obviously playing a part with your Achilles tendon. So can you take us through that journey and just try and paint the picture of just how compromised and questionable it made your 2020 third Olympic Games campaign?
Yeah, so I started dealing with, it's a little bit murky because it's hard to tell when something turns from just sort of Achilles calf tightness to something a little bit more chronic. So I was certainly dealing with kind of Achilles tenderness and tightness at the beginning of runs, probably as early as 2014, maybe 2015. And it was one of those things where like it would be tight for the first 5 to 10 minutes, but things would then kind of warm up. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm doing heavy training right now. This is just sort of general tightness and it will eventually go away. And, I would every once in a while, if it would flare up a little bit more, I'd go see a PT and, maybe get a little bit of ultrasound or something done on it. And so I kind of progressed in that. And then it just seemed, every single buildup we would have, it would get a little bit worse. So my Achilles would stay sore for longer into the run, and there would be more days where I would feel it than I wouldn't feel it, to the point where late 2015, as we headed into preparation for our 2016 marathon trials, we were down in Florida doing a lot of our training, and it was essentially all the time, every run. Like it progressed to the point where there was no step that I could take from the minute I woke up to the minute I went to bed that I wasn't feeling it in some form. And I technically have the Haglunds on both sides, but my right was definitely the worst one. And so, like, if you watched me run, like especially during that first 10 minutes, it looked like I had like a stress fracture or I had broken something because my form was just all over the place. There were compensations happening all over. It probably would have been smart to shut it down, but I kind of made this deal with myself that like, well, this is an Olympic year. Technically, you can still complete these workouts. So we're just going to go all in and we'll deal with this after an Olympic year. But at the same time, like it's kind of hard to commit to chasing an Olympic dream when like you're still holding yourself back thinking like, well, it's not going to work out because I'm so hurt right now. So I limped through the marathon buildup. Yeah, essentially with one and a half legs. And that continued into the track trials to the point where when I finished the 10K track trials in 2016, I made the deal with myself that I'm not going to put a race on the books until this thing is taken care of. And so I stayed at Hanson's for another 4 or 5 months. At that time, for a bunch of different reasons, the injury being only one of them, I was pretty much ready to leave Michigan. So I moved back to Seattle for a little while. While there, I was in the middle of my second attempt to build back up. So I just got into this cycle where I would get the Achilles to calm down through a bunch of PT and I would do new rehab exercises, whatever it was. The number of eccentric loading protocols I've gone through is ridiculous. So I would build up and then I would reach a certain threshold of mileage. The Achilles would flare up and I'm like, okay, well, we're back to square one. We're not putting any races on the book. And so then I would go try a new treatment. So in 2017, I think, early 2017, I got PRP in my Achilles, so that marked the beginning of my third attempt to come back. During that time, I left Seattle, moved home for a little bit, and then decided to make the move to Colorado. I just needed to change the scenery. I had been trying to train on my own, and that wasn't working out, so I knew I wanted to be part of a training group, and I knew I wanted to go to grad school. So Boulder, Colorado, where I live now, had both of those, so I called up Lee Troop and asked if I could join the group. He said yes. So a week later, I had everything in my car and I was driving out. And that was in the middle of my third attempt to come back. We were able to get into started doing workouts. I was doing some tempos. I was starting to get maybe a little bit of fitness to the point where nothing was on the books. But we thought, well, maybe in the spring we can try and do cross or something. And then it flared up again. So we did another round of new doctors, new PTs. Went in and saw Jason Glowney here at the University of Colorado Medical Center. And we finally made the decision that we're doing all of this stuff to try to treat the tissue, this Achilles that's inflamed. There's a bunch of, issues with the tendon fibers, all this kind of stuff. But we're never going to be able to get this tendon calmed down to the point where it won't be re-aggravated by that little bone spur that's happening in the back. So we made the decision to get the Haglund surgery, got that cut off. And that was in May of 2018.
Yep. So,
I'm mixing up my timeline right now. I know I've said it in other places, but I can't think off the top of my head.
No, that's the date that I have, Jake. That's the date that I have.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, May 4th, 2018. So we got the surgery. So that meant 2 weeks in a cast, 6 weeks in a boot. Finally, we were able to come back to running with 1 minute jog, 9 minute walk. So 30 minutes of activity, 3 of them were jogging, and then we would slowly change that ratio up. Had a couple small setbacks, but then we finally started getting into a place where we could do kind of, easy jogging. So by early 2019, I was back to actually doing some workouts and some training. Did my first 5K back May of 2019. It was just like a local little 5K race. I was out of shape and slow, but it was, I was able to win, so that was nice. So going into Chicago, I mentioned earlier the kind of doubts I had going around it was because 3 years off, I had probably, I don't know, a little bit, 9-8 months of like kind of running under my belt, but this was my first healthy build up back. So I was very skeptical as to whether or not I would have any real fitness. I thought it would take longer to get back into full old Jake racing shape, but then it went fantastic. I ran a huge PR, 2.5 minutes, felt great doing it. I felt competitive all the way to the very end. It wasn't like I was hanging on by the skin of my teeth. And so after that, doubts were mostly gone. I mean, doubts as to whether or not I could be a competitive runner, mixing it up at the highest levels again. Still doubts about whether or not the Olympics made sense. But going into the trials after that Chicago race, in that race, 10 Americans broke 2:12, 4 of us broke 2:11. So I did that race beating a pretty competitive American field, which gave me the confidence to say, all right, if you find yourself in a pack at the Olympic trials, you belong there. That is a reasonable dream. You might be one of the dark horses based on your time, but like it is reasonable to expect that you can go out and compete and be competitive at the Olympics. So I went into the Olympics nervous in the sense that like anything can go wrong in a race, but not doubting whether or not I deserve to be there and deserve to be running at the front. And that served you very well when you chased back down the group in front there, and caught up with them about the 30K mark, right? Yes. Yeah.
He's back.
At that point, I had been reeling him in for a couple miles, and it's like, so the entire thought that whole time was just, oh, you're catching them, because I was making chunk gains for that whole time. And so at that point, I was like, if you've done all the work to put yourself here, it would be the most crushing disappointment of all to have it all go to waste at this point. You can't let it go now. And I read, in the Runner's World article, which we'll link up in the show notes, because the article written by Taylor Dutch, I think it was one of the best bits of sports journalism I've read for so long. And, she commented that your coach, Lee Troop, former guest of the show, episode 101, that he had instructed you to run to it, don't run from it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it kind of helped that like the race had gone almost exactly according to plan. But yeah, Lee's fantastic. I can be a little bit intellectual about my approach to race, and Lee is very much emotional. And so I think to really make something happen at the end of the race when you're on tired legs and you really want something, you need that emotional fire. And so we were in no doubts. It's like when you get to the very end there, it's going to be a battle. It's going to come down to a few guys, and yeah, it's time to mix it up and embrace the competitive nature and the magnitude of the moment and just go after it. Well, wow, and that you did, and you grabbed that American flag. You passed 43-year-old Abdi there, just on the line, the final few meters, and it must have just been the most incredible feeling. You probably couldn't even put words to it, I suspect. Yes, I have definitely tried, and I'm starting to run out of adjectives, right? I'm calling it amazing. Doesn't really capture kind of the emotional release of that, especially because so I caught the chase pack at about 24 miles. And so you kind of go out on this last little final out and back, and then you start coming back in towards the city. And I had been making these big gains. And so as I was coming up in the group, I was trying to think about how I was going to handle it. And I was like, you can't just tuck in and then go. These guys are tired. They've been coming back to you. So you need to push in, or you need to put in like a big surge. You need to try and break them because they're not expecting you to be there. I put in that big surge, and then they didn't break. And then I put in another surge, and I didn't break. I kept getting small gains on Abdi, and then he'd keep coming back. And I was like, I thought they were done. I thought getting caught that late in a race when you think it's going to be a 3-person race, and then you find a 4th person jumping on you, I thought that was going to get him. And so I felt good about my ability to compete against them. But at the same time, there were 3 of us, and there were only 2 spots left. And so I'd spent that whole last 2 miles like, don't get ahead of yourself. You have not made the team yet. This is not in the bag. Like, you need to be hungry and hunting this entire time. And then that last 10 meters when I finally knew, like, nope, no, there's no time for anybody to catch you now. You're actually on this team. Yeah. Like the release of just, the previous 10 minutes of like hoping to hold so many people off and that sort of stress, plus just the months and years of thinking about this particular race, that all came out at that time. And that sort of, that release is, we'll call it overwhelming. That'll be the adjective of the day. That's the adjective of the day. And I think a picture tells 1,000 words, and the picture of you, with your fist pumped and Abdi in the background with his arms raised, and the gentleman there in 4th just behind you guys, it tells the story. It's one of sport's great pictures, I'd say. And I was actually up at altitude in Addis Ababa there in Mizan with Zane Robertson, Kiwi runner who I'd been assisting through an injury, and Abdi lives just around the corner from Zane up there, and I actually saw Abdi head off to the airport in his car and with a driver, and those guys stopped and had an exchange, and Abdi said, "I'll see you in Tokyo, man. I'll be on that team." So when you guys were running to the line, I'm thinking, all right, Abdi's booked his spot. That's what he told Zane. So who's going to get this other spot? And it was absolutely terrific to see the Boulder Track Club singlet jump up there. So absolutely well done. Hey, thank you so much. yeah, it feels great.
It was amazing. And then there's the adjective again. But, what did Galen Rupp say to you at the end? What was the banter between you guys? He finished 2:09.20, Riley 2:10.02, yourself, and obviously Abdi 1 second behind for his 5th Olympic Games team. So, yeah, what was it like? A sense of collegiateness? Here we are, guys?
Yeah, pretty much. And then Galen and I have had the same surgery. So he got the Haglund surgery on both Achilles. I think he was maybe 2-3 months behind me in the process, but we were pretty close on top of one another. And, I had setbacks in my process, and he obviously had some setbacks in his attempt to come back. This is one of those things where the doctor told me that it would take probably up to a year before you started to feel like yourself again. And, there's all sorts of compensation, right? You spend 8 weeks in a boot, you're going to lose a little bit of muscle mass. So I think there was a little bit of recognition of shared experience there. We were both kind of fighting back from the same injury type of thing, and a little bit of a recognition of that. And then with Abdi, I've been watching that guy since I was in high school, so it was more just a little bit of awe of someone that I had on a poster on my wall back in college. So so that's that part of the experience.
You're listening to US Olympic Marathon qualifier Jake Riley sharing around his highs, lows, and learnings on this featured performer episode. Support for today's show comes from POGO Physio's online consultations for runners and endurance athletes. If you are a runner, triathlete, or endurance athlete frustrated by pain or injury, then now is a great time to take action and get back to your physical best. Our philosophy at POGO Physio is very simple. We do not wish to see you for a session more than what you require. We just want to ensure you get back to your physical best and cross what we term the physio finish line. Now, online consultations are easy from the comfort of your own home. Your running-related injury can be assessed, diagnosed, and treated effectively and efficiently. POGO Physio's online consultations with myself, physiotherapist and exercise scientist with over 25 years working in the endurance sporting field. I stand ready to assist you. Scheduling an appointment is simple. Jump over to pogophysio.com.au/telehealth consultations. From there, you can schedule your 45-minute online consultation from the comfort of your own home. For now, let's jump back with this week's featured performer, US Olympic Marathon qualifier, Jake Riley, sharing on his highs, lows, and learnings.
Jake, before we throw into a performance round, you mentioned you're the intellectual, Lee, your coach, Lee Troop, is the emotional. Obviously when, what we left out of your story, and, we won't dig into every facet, but it wasn't just the injury woes, there was relational woes, there was the loss of, a training partner, John Gray, who we recorded Lee Troop's, your coach's episode, just off the back of that time there for your squad, and it was obviously devastating for so many. And then, there was the part of being unsponsored through the injury process and having to return, I guess, home to your parents' house feeling like you had your tail between your legs.
Yeah.
What kept you going?
It's kind of like what I said. It's that piece of advice of getting through adversity. That was step one. It was, you're going to do something for running today because that's what's on the schedule. Nice. And then I think also running is one of the big helps. It has been kind of a constant in my life. So running became kind of my full-time obsession when I was probably 16. Before that, I was kind of doing other sports, but 16 was when I kind of made the decision that running's my thing. And it kind of became my identity and the sort of the way that I define myself constantly through up till then, which was, I think I was 28 at the time. And so everything else was not going well. I didn't have a job and I was living at home as a 28-year-old, which no one wants to do. I had very little money and no real prospects of making more. There was no sponsor, nothing like that. But I could still do something for running. And so running was a constant. It's something you can do. It's something you have control over. So just getting out and doing that on a daily basis, even if it was just 20-minute runs that kind of hurt, at least it's something, man. At least you're doing something that might potentially yield dividends in the future. So yeah, number one, just kind of coast on inertia. And then I would also say rely on the support of the people that love you and are there for you. My parents were just incredibly generous and supportive during that time, which was, pretty rough. So try and find a support network. If it's not your immediate family for whatever reason, find some friends, try and find somebody to rely on, and don't be afraid to use their emotional energy and support to kind of help get you through it.
And don't forget the top 3 resilience tips, obviously, from Jake Riley in the tough times. Jake, the sponsorship, before we throw into this performance round, you went into the trials, I believe, unsponsored, and correct me if I'm wrong, and then, the Alpha Flyers, the Nike Alpha Flyers, which were released that weekend commercially, I believe were made available to you. And there's that great photo of you standing there with a Vaporfly and an Alpha Fly on, I think, each of your feet that your coach Lee took. So I think, was that a last-minute decision from what I can recall to jump in those and give them a run?
Yep. Yeah. So we knew it was going to come out. I have a friend that works for Nike as part of that production team. So he told me I was going to be able to get my hands on a pair, but also there were some of the Nike athletes that were deciding, even though they had access to both, that they were going to run in the Vaporflies. You saw the results. You saw Kipchoge run his run in the Alpha Fly. You saw some of the numbers coming out that it was maybe a little bit better for economy and other things. So I was kind of leaning towards that idea. We essentially said, we're going to get our hands on the shoe. We're going to have the Vaporflies because you were successful with that in Chicago. But we're going to give it a go. And if you think it really feels better, just put it on. I'm not particularly concerned about blisters or anything going wrong with the shoe. So long as it feels good on my foot, I feel like it's going to go fine. I think if a shoe's giving you blisters at this point, you should probably switch brands because pretty much everybody's got that thing figured out.
Yeah.
Or I guess you have the wrong size shoe. So I put it on and I could just tell a difference for my particular stride. I just felt like I was getting a little bit more return out of it. My stride felt a little bit smoother. And so I didn't really have any regrets about making that decision. A lot of people I've seen are very surprised that I would leave something to the end there. But I don't know, Nike's a good company that makes good products. They know what they're doing. I'm sure they've taken care of the small things. I'll trust them to have made a shoe that can withstand a marathon, and if it feels good to me, I'll put it on. So I wasn't too concerned about it.
I like that. That's perhaps a great understatement there. They know what they're doing. And the rest is history. Jake, you're a fast finisher. So are you ready for the performance round?
I think so. I think I can think pretty quick on my feet. Let's see.
I think you can run quick on those feet too. Here we go. Training session most disliked.
Deke's quarters. So Lee is a disciple of De Castello, and so he has us run Deke's quarters, which there are different iterations of it, but essentially it's 400 at race pace and then 200 float. And by race pace, it's usually around 10K pace, maybe 5K pace, depending on how he's feeling on the day. But essentially, I think it's about 10 laps, and as you're just alternating between those, you never get time to fully recover. I think the other problem is that I was doing it kind of early in my session, so I wasn't really in shape yet. But it's just freaking brutal. I hate it.
And it's great to see some of the Australian traditions and sessions being instilled into you as well there in Boulder. And De Castello, former guest of the show. Now, training session most loved, Jake?
Teller Farms. Here in Boulder, we have Teller.
Got it.
If you're ever in Boulder, you can go and you can run there. It's just a park we have. It's kind of in the hills east of town. And so this workout will mean absolutely nothing to anybody that hasn't actually run out there because the times are completely dependent on where you're going. But essentially we go out and we have a 4-mile hilly tempo. So essentially mostly uphill on the way out, mostly downhill on the way back. Footing is difficult. It's very uphill. So you're just constantly having to deal with pace changing and hill form and sort of maintaining your breath. So it's a 4-mile tempo doing that. And so if you're breaking 22 minutes on that thing, you're having a pretty good day for tempo effort. And then you go straight from that into a gradually uphill. Lee calls it 5K, but I think it's more like 3.3. But anyway, 5K. I call it go. I think he calls it just race effort, whatever it is. You essentially just go as fast as you can for the last 3.3. So it's there's no pace associated with it. It's just whatever you can do as hard as you can go. It is a brutal workout. Again, it's kind of like these quarters. There's nowhere to hide on it. You're never recovering. But I think doing well at that workout that's how I know that I'm ready for the marathon. If I can do well on that thing, I know I'm in good shape and I'm ready to make something happen.
And we might see a few more people out around your area now on these on the telefarm track, eh? Works for you,
make
Jake.
sure you're going single file because it's a very narrow path.
Right, the telefarms. Jake, favorite pre-race meal? What fueled you there in Atlanta in February?
In Atlanta, I just had whatever the pasta dinner was. So I guess, we'll go with pasta. So it was like some pasta with meat sauce, some salad, some rolls, a couple cookies. I'm trying to make Thai food my go-to. 2 nights out in Chicago, I had this really good, it was Pad See Ew at just like a little Thai place around the corner. And that was delightful. So I guess we'll go Pad See Ew.
Pad See Ew. That's a secret recipe. Jake, in a normal training block, what's your bedtime, morning time routine like?
Well, I tell myself that I need to be in bed lights out at 10. I probably push that more to like 10:30-ish, 10:45-ish. And then for waking up, I'll usually get up around 6 a.m.-ish, 6 to 6:30. And I'll modify that a little bit depending on when we have training, when I have to get up. So if we're not meeting for practice, I will wake up later than that. But we meet for practice around 8:30-ish. And so I like to have a couple hours to kind of drink coffee and go through my warm-up routine beforehand.
Beautiful. Jake, who's the athlete you most admire and why?
Let's go Meb Keflezighi. Obviously he has great performances, but I think it's also just the consistency of his performances. He stays healthy, and he shows up at the big races. It does what he needs to do. He's healthy and competitive. He's always going to be there at the end of the race, or he's retired now. But like, you just knew that if Meb was in the race, he was going to show out. And that kind of just consistency through time is really, really admirable. And you just see it in the amount of hard work that he puts in outside, right? It's not like he has some sort of special form and he's kind of coasting on fitness. Like, he puts in the work, he does the training and the rehab and the strength work all outside. And so that's sort of resiliency I really, really admire.
And just a side note, Meb was the race starter, and I believe he may have been there at the finish as well. What did Meb say to you on your qualification?
I didn't get to talk to him after the race.
Okay.
I think we didn't really exchange many words. I got to shake his hand.
Yep.
And then his brother, who's his agent, is also Alafine Tuliamuk's agent. So I got to talk to him a little bit. But even a good job from Meb Keflezighi, who's someone I've been watching, race for the last 20 years it's a real big honor.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful. Toughest competitor you've ever raced. Who was that and why?
I'm not saying this to be poignant, but probably John Gray. I was not on the team here with John. He was actually one of the reasons I wanted to join Boulder Track Club, is because I'd raced him for so long. But my earliest memory of John Gray was at the Mount Sac Invitational. We were running a 10,000. It was pretty early in the season, and our goal going there was just get a time that'll get you into regionals. So we weren't really trying to crush it. But pretty much everybody there was going there. They wanted to get a qualifying time. And so we go out and we're running pretty evenly paced. We're hitting our splits. I was leading, and I didn't really want to be. There was supposed to be a rabbit, and he dropped out. So I was already a little bit cranky, and John was right on my shoulder. And then, I think we were running like probably 70s, something like that. And then at around lap 17, he dropped like a 63 and was trying to hold it for the rest of the race. I've never seen anybody accelerate out of pace as fast as he did. And he didn't hold 63s, but like, he kept that sprint from like 8 laps out. And that was how John would race. Like, you knew that not only was he going to have a kick at the end of the race, that his kick was going to come from way farther out than you wanted it to, and that like he had the goods to back it up. And so going from as far out as John would, you knew it was going to be a battle, and it was not going to be like, a sit and kick type of affair, which is a little bit frustrating because like you're just waiting for John to make his move because he was going to do it earlier than anybody else. John Gray.
Wow, Vale John Gray. Is there a mantra, Jake, that you use when you're racing, or something? Was it Lee's statement to you that was going through your head in Atlanta?
Prior to my comeback, I was never really a mantra guy. For Chicago, it was the legs have it, go get it. I just found, and it was actually at Teller Farms where I discovered this, like that was when my turning point was. I had felt like either my lungs were a little bit behind where my legs were, and my legs were a little bit behind where the lungs were. But that Teller Farm workout, I had a little bit of a breakthrough where I was just trying to get myself to push harder, push harder, push harder. And every time I would ask my legs to give me a little bit more, they finally started to do it. And so that was one of the things I wanted to keep in mind at the end of the race was like, even though you might be hurting sort of aerobically or whatever it is, there is more in your legs. They will have something to give you at the end of the race. The mantra I had going into Chicago was no more next times. So I'm 31 now. Like I said, this is my third Olympic trials. And I felt like in the past, when I would go into big races, I wouldn't go in with a real focused mindset. If there was something that I had, like, I would make kind of commitments to myself at the beginning of any sort of buildup, like this segment, you're going to work on, core or strength, or you're going to get more on top of your Achilles rehab. You're actually going to go in every week. And then it seemed like inevitably in any segment, like I would maintain that resolution and then I would kind of lose it when, things got busy for a little while and I just never pick it up. And the thing that I would tell myself at the end of the segment, especially if it didn't go well, it's like, well, okay, well, it didn't go well because you didn't do X. You will take care of that next time. But then inevitably next time that same sort of thing would happen. Well, when you're 24, 25, like, you have probably quite a few good years barring any sort of catastrophic injury to kind of make those fixes. But, at 31 unsponsored, there aren't going to be any more next times, right? This is your last chance to do, or potentially your last chance to do everything that you said you were going to do, to put everything on the line, to commit as fully and completely as you can. And that includes in the race, right? Like the pain you suffer, the pain of making a particular move, that will not last with you as nearly as long as like the pain of thinking that you could have done more at the end, right? And you're not going to get a next time to erase that pain. And so no more next times. Like,
yeah, that's powerful.
This is your shot. You need to put it all on the line. And so that's what I was telling myself when I left the chase pack at around line 20. And I think that might be one of the things I try and keep in my head, though. Now that I've made an Olympics, there might be another next time. I have a little bit more motivation to keep it going until 2024. We'll see.
Well, clearly at 32, looking at Abdi and even Legat, for example, there's quite a few years left in you, mate. But look, we'd all be well served, I think, to adopt a mantra along those lines. No more next times, no matter what age or where we are. Best recovery tip, Jake?
Foam roller.
Foam roller.
I think everybody throws out sleep and they throw out nutrition, all this kind of stuff. But I find the thing that makes me feel the best, just get a good foam roll before you go to bed. Yeah.
Roll out the legs.
All of those other things are true as well. But one thing that you might not be doing, give yourself a good foam roll, give yourself a full body rub.
Yep. And only true, excluding the night before a race where you have given us permission to stare at the ceiling and still perform well. One word to describe your racing style, Jake?
Oh boy. I don't know. Let's go with gritty, I guess. I don't know. I don't like coming up with adjectives to describe myself.
Gritty.
Yeah,
is that what you said?
We'll go with gritty.
Gritty, yeah?
Yeah, gritty.
I like it. Oh, gritty. I thought you said greedy.
G-R-I-T.
Yeah, gritty. No, that's...
sure, we'll
I think
call that too.
I think that applies. Well, when it comes to 4 spots trying to make it to 3, you got to be greedy, right? That's mine.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Last several questions here in the last few questions in this performance round. Jake, how would you describe being in the zone?
I know I'm in the zone when, I've gone through, whatever the interval is and I haven't looked at my watch. So you're not thinking about pace. You're not thinking about time. You're not thinking about how you're feeling. It's just where are you and where are the other runners? You're sort of just flowing freely. Like you've kind of reached this place where all the sort of metrics that you have in training just start to fall off. I think I've had most of my best results. And I think one of the reasons I enjoy cross country and road racing is like there's no splits. It's just you and the guy next to you. And if you can kind of get into that rhythm and focus more on, beating that guy and focusing on the rhythm of your breathing and pushing yourself out, like, you don't need to get caught up in the clock. So yeah, when you forget the clock and forget your body and you're just racing.
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful. I presume the last time you were in the zone was the trials?
Oh yeah, baby.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Final question in the performance round. The hardest session you've ever done? Was it Deke's quarters?
No, because I don't think I was in a position to get everything out of myself. We have Flagstaff Mountain here in Boulder, which it's overlooking the town. I'm not sure what the elevation difference is. I think it's close to 2,500 feet, I would imagine, 2,000 to 2,500. And there's a long, winding 4-mile road that goes up to that. And one of Troop's favorite tempos, which luckily we didn't have to do this last time, is it's just go tempo that 4 miles uphill. Again, I've used this adjective a lot to describe Lee. It's unrelenting. You're just constantly pushing yourself up. Like if you can average under 6 minute pace on that hill, like you've friggin' crushed it. And the last time we did it, I was doing okay, and then that last mile, a little bit of a side ache, and I just completely bonked, and I just completely torched me. So yeah, Flagstaff 4 mile uphill tempo. Hardest thing I've ever done.
Beautiful. You are out of the performance round, Jake. You can chalk that up as a session for yourself for the day.
You're listening to Jake Riley, US Olympic Marathon qualifier, sharing around the very significant highs, lows, and learnings from his career to date. If you missed last week's episode featuring Australian 800-metre champion and Olympian Peter Boll, here's a little snippet of what you missed.
Often you worry so much about things, and then when you do it, it's actually not that bad. So I've been sitting here worrying about the win, worrying about the race, and then when you go race, it's actually not that bad. Like, what could you have done in that time, worrying and doing all those things? So just, I guess, to trust yourself a little bit more. And it's not easy, it's not supposed to be, but it will get there.
To hear Peter sharing around why intent matters so much and why he likes to encourage consistent action, be sure to jump over and tune into the full episode 208. While you're there, you can peruse the archives of the show, dating right back to episode 1, featuring Australian surf lifesaving Ironman champion Ali Day. For now, let's jump back with this week's featured performer, Jake Riley.
Finally, final two questions, Jake. If you could give listeners of the show one piece of advice only to help them perform at their own physical best, whatever the endeavour, from everything you've learnt over your many years of running, the highs, the lows, and we call them the learnings, what would Jake Riley's number one piece of advice be? Tough, I know.
This goes back to what I was saying before. It's consistency. The accumulative effect of lots and lots of miles versus crushing one particular workout. I think when you see, and I listened to that podcast you did with Troop, like he talked about one of the reasons he thinks his later Olympic campaigns didn't go as well as his early ones is he kept reaching. He kept thinking like, in order to do better, I need to do more than I did before. And so one of the things that he talks to me a lot when we're talking about, planning out our training is, we're not going to all of a sudden think that like, if 110 miles a week was working well, that we need to now do 120 in order to make new gains. No, we're going to go back. We're going to keep hitting 110. We're going to continue to be healthy. And then we're just going to maybe try and get a little bit more out of ourselves than any one particular workout, but you don't need to knock it out of the park. It's just consistent. So, keep yourself healthy, get your runs in, and you will see results over time.
Yeah, and, you pointed out Lee's experiences with his Olympic campaigns, and that was, seemingly the overreaching and the effects of it that, your coach Lee incurred with his marathon career at one point, through that career. Jake, finally, every guest of the show issues listeners with a physical challenge for the week. Now, at the time of recording, it is unprecedented. There are lockdowns in some countries and not in others due to COVID-19. So before we pressed play, you did have a physical challenge in mind. Can we start with that one and then we can shift to the new one?
Yeah, so the one I was coming in here ready to tell you was put an all-out effort at the end of your at the end of your tempo. And I think this only really applies to people that have been doing their buildups for a little while. But one of the reasons I love that Teller Farm workout so much, and you don't want to overuse this, but I think especially when you're training for marathon, you get so caught up in pace, right? And so, I'm running 5:30s or 5:10s or whatever it is. And I guess you have Australian listeners, so whatever the K equivalent of that is. There is something that comes along with pace. Even if that is a hard pace to hit, that's what you need to get out of yourself. There is a certain, especially the better you know your body, what a particular pace requires of you. And then you try to give no more, no less. You try to hit that pace. And I think that's great for the first half of the race. So, going back to my previous advice, the first 20 miles of the race, you want to be hitting pace. You want to stay within yourself and you want to, be able to maintain. There comes a point in every single race when you need to get out of that rhythm and you need to go. And if you're not ready to do that, you're not going to really surprise yourself with the result. And so I think one of the things I really drew on when I had to go solo from the chase pack from the second chase pack to the first chase pack was in that Teller Farms workout, you're not worried about pace. You're not trying to hit something. It's just you have to focus and work on getting as much out of yourself as you can possibly get, right? So if you are hurting now, that is not the threshold of your hurt. Like, you're trying to get even more out of it. You have to find some way to dig as deep as you possibly can. And I think if you really want to improve yourself, you need to practice that at least a couple of times. And like I said, don't do that every single workout, but like give yourself a couple workouts where it's just an all out at the end of your, get yourself a little bit tired, do it on tired legs, and then just see what you can do. And if you can do that twice and you get more out of yourself the second time, I think you're going to be really happy with how that pays off in your race. So that was my previous bit of advice. And obviously I have a much more thought out explanation for that than whatever nonsense I'm about to say.
And in these times of lockdowns, anything you might challenge us with, Jake?
Well, obviously this depends on where you are and what you need to do to stay safe. So for those of you that are on total lockdown, you're not allowed to go out of your house, do something active. Like try and get yourself 30 minutes of whatever the hell it is. If that's doing Zumba in your living room, like just get yourself to do it. And if you can do that every day for a week, I think that's a huge accomplishment based on how frustrating and annoying it can be to try to get yourself to do something inside of an apartment. If you're, someone that can get outside and go for a run. So just try and find a way to stay active, right? Don't let sort of the scariness and intimidation of the moment stop you from trying to do something. And one of the things I found out, and this was in college and moving forward, is like in a stressful situation, pretty much every time, and I don't know if I can say this without exception, but pretty much like you're going to feel better at the end of exercise than you did before. So even if you're someone that's like, I don't want to be running in my apartment, I think at the end of that time you will feel good. So yeah, just do something. And if you need Zumba videos, we can do them together.
I think you need to post a Zumba video now, Jake.
Yeah, sure. I have to figure out how to do it first. That was perfectly in my head. But I'll dance. We'll put on a little Latin jazz and we'll get to it.
All right. Well, we will all be looking forward to seeing that. And on that, we can follow you over on Instagram, your handle, Jake.
Jake Bill Riley.
Easy, and we'll tag that up in the show notes, and that's Riley. And Jake, we're going to call that physical challenge the 30 minutes of whatever the hell you want from Jake Riley. I think it's maybe one of the all-time greats. Jake, your story is exceptional. We've only skimmed the surface on some of these points today with regards to your chronology and your perseverance over the years, over the trials. We call them the highs, lows, and learnings of this show. And so thank you for taking time out of your day there to bring us a little bit on the journey. And certainly when we get to press play on the Tokyo Olympic Games, you will have, I dare say, a whole swag of people cheering you on. So thank you once again.
Hey, thanks so much. And just a word to everybody out there. Wash your hands, social distance, and stay safe. And we're going to get through this. And Olympics will happen again, and running will happen again. And thoughts go out to everybody. Stay safe.
So there you have it. Another episode of the Physical Performance Show, and I trust and I know you enjoyed Jake Riley's share-ins today. If you did, please reach out and engage Jake. Let him know what it was that you took from today's show. These are challenging times, and I really empathise with a situation like Jake's, where he's finally broken through, achieved his athletic dream, and now he's sitting on the sidelines waiting for 12 months to compete at what's now been announced as the Tokyo 2021 Olympic Games. So we certainly wish Jake and his coach, Lee Troop, former guest of the show, episode 101. If you haven't yet listened to Lee's episode, Lee's an Australian distance running icon and star who himself has overcome some great adversities. Please jump back and check out episode 101. You'll find Jake Riley easily over on Instagram at Jake Bill Riley, JakeBillRiley. And be sure to give Jake a follow. Keep the podsies coming. That's a screenshot of the episode you're enjoying and tagging in the Physical Performance Show at Physical Performance Show. You'll find myself over on social at Brad_beer. And don't forget, you have the ability to ask our featured guests questions over on our Facebook page, The Physical Performance Show, after their episode has gone live. And we do our best to help those questions get answered. A massive thanks to those leaving ratings and reviews for the show over on iTunes. It is always such a thrill to see them coming through. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button from wherever it is, whatever platform you use to enjoy the Physical Performance Show. Subscribing is the best way to see the show grow, as is sharing the episode with someone in your world who you know would take a lot from Jake's sharings today. A big thanks to the team who make this show possible. Daryl Misson, our audio engineer, Susan Wilkin on all things show administration, Matthew Walding on all things graphic design. They really are the driving force behind the show being outputted each and every week. Don't forget, if you are a runner or triathlete, frustrated by a running injury, be it a tendinopathy, bone stress injury, then please consider getting it sorted, particularly through this shutdown period, jumping over and scheduling an online consultation with myself over at pogophysio.com.au/telehealth consultations. Now, coming up on next week's episode, we keep the featured performer theme going. And I'll share with you a conversation with fellow US runner Mike Wardian, who played a fantastic game of top threes, sharing around his top 3 tips for masters runners, marathon PBs, and so much more. Mike's running resume is unique. Mike boasts records such as the fastest 50 kilometre on a treadmill, set in 2015, 2:59, the fastest ever time for all of the Abbott World Major Marathons, consisting of Tokyo, Boston, London, Berlin, Chicago, New York, with an average time of 2:31.09. Mike can race up to 50 times plus a year, and just recently took out a bronze medal at the USA Track and Field 50 kilometre Road Championships. And fascinatingly, at the time of this recording, Mike has just completed a backyard quarantine ultra marathon, completing 422 kilometers in 63 hours. So be sure to be tuning in next week to hear Mike Wardian's episode. Until then, keep pursuing your physical best. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.